morning. Howdy. So every time I see a microphone like this, secretly it reminds me of, do you remember when like Burger King used to do the microphone thing and then they would like tell the back what you were ordering? So I just feel like I'm a Burger King cashier. Just so you know that secretly that's really what I'm thinking about every time I speak into one of these. Seems more appropriate to share that here than with the teenagers at state speech where they're all like, what? All right. So this morning, we're going to do things a little bit differently. When I asked for advice about what exactly should be included in the State of the State, I got some great answers, but unfortunately, somebody else had already told me they were saying all those things later in the day. So I said, all right, we'll switch it up a little bit. I think it's kind of important, as we've gone through a lot of changes over the past 2 to 3 years, to kind of look at where we've been, where we are now, and where we need to go in the future. And my presentation is probably going to lead to more questions than it is answers, and that's okay. I'm really interested in what you guys think the answers should be. So as you're listening, please feel free to take notes or to jot down things or to start an open email rant to me about all the answers that you have that I haven't heard yet. That's A-okay with me. So I'm going to start by telling you that this morning I had every intention of being here nice and early so I could greet all of you and be happy. But the same road that I take every single morning to get to work, I got there and the cars were backed up for like 3 blocks for no reason. And they weren't moving. And there wasn't really a route that I could figure out that I could take to get around it. They decided that they were going to pave my road right in the middle of rush hour with the school buses and everything else just waiting. They didn't care. And it was a little frustrating, and initially I said, okay, I could panic about this and I could freak out, or I could cuss out that sign when it clearly says I have the green light. I could do all those things. Or I could just figure out, okay, so the path has changed, where am I going to go, what do I need to do to the next step, right? And I know that sounds canned, but that really is what happened. You can like ask the 4 people who have voicemails from me this morning saying, I promise I'm not ditching the keynote, I'll be there. It's really what's happening. So kind of our organization is in that same place. We looked at things a few years ago and we went, there's a lot of stuff we don't really like about the way we're doing things. It feels like summer board meetings for just the board members aren't super productive. We've tried a couple of different formats, and it just doesn't seem to be making the change we want it to make. There are times at Coach's Clinic we look and there are more empty seats than we would like to see. What are we doing about it, and what do we want to do about it? So we kind of looked at all of that, and one of the big things that came out of that was we adopted a new constitution. Okay? And that actually happened about 1.5 years ago, a little bit more than that now. But the thing that's interesting about that is that I don't know about you guys. Actually, let me just ask, how many of you have actually read the entire IHSFA Constitution? How many of you really have read it and not just skimmed a section at a time because you needed one answer? Like you sat down one day and you're like, I'm reading this whole thing. Okay, I'm just going to say most of those, except for maybe 2, are on the board. All right? So here's my second confession. My first is that I feel like a Burger King worker up here. My second is that I have never actually read the Constitution, even though I was on your board for 4 or 5 years, in a true like front-to-back manner like that, until I decided to run for executive director. And then I was very confused because all of a sudden I went, whoa, the descriptions in here do not match anything that I thought we were. And actually, if I hadn't sat down and read that, I probably would have continued to say, no, thank you, I'm not running. But when I read the way it had changed, these descriptions, I went, this makes a lot more sense, and I think it's something I can handle and I can do. But the problem is that a lot of people haven't noticed that those changes took effect. So for instance, the executive director, when you think of that, and people still say this to me and they look very confused when I go, that's not my thing, I don't do that. They think that I like run everything and that I'm the big boss and that I like take charge and I make all these decisions. I don't do that. If you read the Constitution, there's actually very little that I do that actually has to do with facing you guys directly. Most of the stuff that I do faces externally now. So I go out to the meetings and I represent us, or I try to get principals and others to support us. Very little of my job description actually talks about what I should be doing with the body. Interestingly, if you read the executive director description, I really don't have to be at tournaments. I really don't have to be at Coach's Clinic if you just go by the letter of what the Constitution says. So that makes it very interesting because the expectation in the past year or so without people reading that has been that I know all the answers and I'm running everything, and they think I'm way more stressed out than I am. But that's okay with me. I'm very quick to say, no, a lot of that is Dave McKenzie's responsibility, or Sarah Berghoff's handling that now, or go see Joe Troyer about that, or a lot of times, Mary Freed would be happy to answer that question. So I say all of that to say, if there have been times over the past year that you felt like you asked a question and you got shuffled around with like 3 or 4 people before you got an answer, it wasn't because we were all just like passing the buck and saying, I don't want to do this. It wasn't because we don't necessarily know the answers. People, A, trying to figure out what our jobs are and making sure we do ours and we don't take somebody else's. And B, that we really want to make sure that we're doing it the right way, that we're honoring what you voted into place and doing it the way you asked us to do it now. And I think you'll find that it actually more closely represents the way most not-for-profits are set up if you're involved in other not-for-profit organizations or your church or anything like that. It also just kind of represents a more true model, and I think gives us more room for growth. So that's kind of where we were and what you might have been experiencing as you tried to talk to us over the past year. So now we need to look at where we are right now. Some of you have already noticed, and I'm just going to tackle this head on instead of burying it somewhere. The dues went up this year. Okay, the dues are now $115 for the year annually, which is not what they've been for a long time. But I will point out that is the first dues increase you've had as an organization in many, many, many years. While I sat on the board, I can't tell you how many times people came to me and begged me to increase those dues along with the other board members, and I just went, that doesn't seem very nice. I don't want to do that, and I didn't. And so we like refused to increase the dues. And coaches were pretty happy about that, right? Like that's one less fundraising trip that they had to make, one less like potluck dinner they had to do, whatever. But unfortunately, at the same time, coaches were starting to complain about some things they didn't feel were being run the way they would like to see them run. There were certain things they would like at the tournaments, or there were certain things at Coach's Clinic. But we can't continue to increase the service that we're providing on a budget that is 15 years old. And we're starting to feel those strains. So we've had to increase dues, but I hope that you understand that it really is leading to some bigger, better projects. And there's some other things we're doing that hopefully will keep us from having to do that too much again in the near future. So we're continuing to fund our old programs. We haven't had to cut anything, and we're improving in some areas. The other thing that I've realized is that our motto almost has been, and is right now, but I'm just a volunteer. How many of you were trained in college specifically how to run a speech or a debate team? You were set for that. Okay, even fewer than read the Constitution, right? So even though all of you in here are now signed up to do that, you don't necessarily feel, except for like 3 of you, that you had any much preparation for that. Think about how long we teach people to like be behind the wheel before we trust them with a car. Or think about how many hours of student teaching you had to do before you became a teacher, if you are a teacher right now. Think about even like any job, even a McDonald's worker, how much specific training they get to work the cash register before they're just like set free to do that on their own. Now compare that with how many of you actually said that you were trained to do the job that you're here for this weekend. It's kind of frightening and daunting. And so our response a lot of times when somebody asks us to do something is, I'm just a coach. I don't know. I like working with the kids. I can't do that. And that's a real problem because most of you are way more talented than you give yourselves credit for. I would probably say all of you, but I don't actually know all of you, so I can't like statistically do that. 3 of you won't let me speak in absolutes. Okay. So I'm going to say most of you are way more talented than you give yourselves credit for on the average basis. And so as a result, we kind of have this weird mentality as an organization, even though we are accredited with the IRS, even though we are recognized as a not-for-profit, and I have to like file the tax paper, which really means I just sign it and Kathy does all the work. We like to pretend that we're not a real organization. We like to pretend that this isn't a professional group of people who are all after the same aim. And when we're asked to do something new, we kind of act like we're not capable of trying new things. Okay? We act like the kid who's been asked to eat broccoli. Inside Out is really great because she hates broccoli, and I totally get it. But at any rate, so we're in this place where we're a professional organization. We have an annual budget of thousands of dollars. We are giving out scholarships. We are running tournaments. We are doing things that a lot of people aren't capable of doing. And yet, when asked to do things to make it better, we all act as if we don't know how to do anything. And it's time that we stop that. It's time that we realize that we are all professionals, and whether we have all the training that we want or not, we need to start being willing to accept challenges. And in some cases, that's really little. In some cases, it might be, Erin's going to say, somebody recommended you to lead a workshop at Coach's Clinic, and we're asking you to just remember, you teach your students on your team or in your class every day. You can handle a room of 20 adults in a conference for a half an hour. Just do it. Just trust us if we say, we think you would be good at this, instead of shrugging it off and saying you don't know how, when clearly you do because you have a team and you care enough to be here. Okay? So then the next thing is that I've had trouble with as I've started to reach externally into other organizations is defining who we are as an organization. If you go to our website right now, unless you are a coach or a student who is a member, there is nothing really there that will help you understand what in the heck the IHSFA is. And it doesn't help that then when you say our name, we're the Indiana High School Forensics Association, which is A, a lot of words, and B, that forensics thing is really trippy, especially since the radio this morning was telling me that Taylor Swift really wants to be a forensics detective. I don't think that Taylor envisioned just being a speech and debate person who went and checked sources. So that word's a little confusing. Has a lot of definitions, and even when you try to look it up in the dictionary, it doesn't really help you understand what it is we do. And no, I'm not doing the NSDA thing and saying, and we're going to change our name. I'm not going there. What I am saying is that I need a clear answer when somebody asks me, so you're the executive director of the IHSFA, what do you do? I don't really know how to answer them. I'm going to be honest about that. Sometimes the answer is, well, we help students learn how to do speech and debate in competitive settings, and it gives them real-life skills, and they apply those in the job market and elsewhere. And that's all nice and good. But other times, like at Coach's Clinic, I'm going, but if that's really what I'm doing, then what's this weekend? Because that's not what we're doing here. And there are a lot of decisions that we make as a board that have very little to do with the actual training of skills and development. And so as we're sitting here right now, I realize that we don't have a clear mission or vision of who we are and what we want to be. So that leads us to the future. Where are we going? This year, you will notice that I will start talking a lot about the mission and vision statement. And some of you in this room were also with me in this room a few years ago when we attempted this before. And we had a vision statement that the board worked on, and then somebody told us they hated it, and they would fix it, and then it never came back. Like it disappeared completely. I've tried to track it down, and nobody has any trace of where it went. So we have to start all over on that. But I believe that it's really important. As much as it just sounds like business jargon, and I kind of hate myself for sounding like the school administrator who talks about the business model, we really need something. Because right now I feel like we're just kind of floating, and depending on the day and the mood and what crisis has happened, depends on how we answer who we are and what we're trying to do. And it's time that we had an answer that we can always kind of steer back to keep us on track and on the right course. So that's the first thing, and I might be asking some of you, remember how I said quit shrugging it off when I say, please help me, and you go, oh, I don't know if I can. I'm going to be asking some people to help me work on this mission and vision statement, because I think it's really important that that vision is set by all different kinds of people in the organization, and not just the people who have read the Constitution front to back, or even not just those who actually teach all day and then coach a team, because that's not the only people in the organization. I'm aware that we have people in this room, including myself, who work a job who has nothing to do with education, and then coach, and then do this on the side. And so it's important that all of those views are included when we do the mission and vision statement. So that's the first. After we do that, then it will be easier for us to create a landing page on the IHSFA website that actually welcomes those who want to show interest in us, whether that be a principal who's deciding whether or not to support a program, whether that be a student's parent who has heard about speech and debate but doesn't know where to start, or whether that's just somebody who happens to look up forensics and somehow gets to us. We need something that clearly sparks interest and draws them in, and isn't just here's the SpeechWire calendar and here's the Congress legislation if you know that that's what you're looking for, because that's not going to help us grow. And long term, we have to grow, okay? We're kind of staying stable, maybe shrinking a little bit right now, and I don't really like that because I like making all the friends that I make here. Plus it helps the kids. So there's that. And then the third thing that I'm working on is that we're going to start really strategically building some partnerships. So we've already kind of had some outside partnerships, including like the IHS, the National Federation of High Schools. So every year the executive director goes, they meet with all the other coaches of speech debate from, well, the head coach, the state leaders, whatever they call themselves in their place, in the fall. So I'm doing that later this month. So we'll continue that relationship. I'm also starting to work with some principals to figure out what's our best approach to talking to principals about having speech and debate programs. And I know there are probably a couple of people that are frustrated with me because they like talked to their principal and they said we could do this and it would be great. And I said, but first I want to do some other things. And I think that kind of frustrated them because they're like, well, if you're not talking to the principals, then how are you going to get anybody interested? Again, I feel like I have to get some other things in place because if we just throw them in and then there's nothing there to help them answer questions after I leave, it's not a really pretty, like, stay with us, okay? So I am working on that. It's just going to be a little bit slower than I think a couple people envisioned. And then kind of like my trip to the Martin House this morning. Yeah, and then the State Principals Association, and then finally, this one I am working on right now. The Rotary Club reached out to me, and I had a very interesting conversation with them. So it turned out that it was just the Indianapolis area Rotary Club leader, but he didn't understand that there were more than 5 high schools in the state that did speech. So when he asked me, how many chapters do you have that do this activity? I said, well, we're around like 80, 85, maybe closer to 100 depending on the year and which count you're taking. And he goes, really? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, what about just in Marion County? And I said, oh, well, there you're probably closer to like 20, 25. I said, I don't have the list in front of me, so I can't like really name them all off. I go, but there are quite a few. And he's like, I thought there were 5. And I go, nope, there are a lot more. And he said, so it really is worth it to continue hosting the Rotary Speech Program. And I go, it really is. You just really have to work with us and not contact me in September about what date we can work out in the spring. As a matter of fact, I can give you 5 years of dates now to say, don't do it here. Okay? So we're working on that so that your students will have opportunities outside of our own organization as well to use those skills and get the money. And then the American Legion, I had a very nice lunch with them last spring before I went and judged their quarterfinals. And while some of those speakers were really good, it was also really obvious to me nationally which ones of them had done our form of speech and debate and which ones just did Legion and called it a day. And I think our kids are missing a great opportunity when we aren't working with them to figure out how to strengthen that relationship as well. It's scholarship money that would be pretty easy for a lot of our students. So I'm working on that, and I'm going to give them a half-hour presentation next weekend. I haven't decided exactly what I'm saying, but if you have something you want me to communicate with the Legion about why your kids either do enjoy or don't enjoy doing that program right now, please share that with me because I would love to share it with their national body next week. So that's kind of where I am. I am reaching out a little bit and doing those things in my job description, but I'm also realizing that there are a lot of things that as a board we've had to say, okay, here's the dream, but what are the steps to get there first? And so it may feel like at times when you talk to us, we're not taking action. But trust me, the board that you have right now is taking more action steps and doing more for your body than I have seen a board do in many years. It's just that it's not all really obvious in outcomes right now because they're doing a lot of building blocks. that you've asked them to do, that I'm encouraging them to do, and that we're being held accountable for in a way that I don't think we ever have been before. So I know this speech wasn't like super exciting, like yay, go raw IHSFA. And if you're a new coach, you're probably like, what in the world is she talking about? But I felt like it was really important after a few years of really big changes without like a lot of talk about what was happening behind the scenes, that we kind of cover that and realize that we do have a goal, we're going there, we're taking steps, and some of it's not going to be super pleasant because who likes to change anything? Not me. But that's where we are, and we're going to get there, and it's going to be great. A few housekeeping things. Sorry, that was a really bad conclusion. And my 1 in the round just sunk down to like a 3 or 4. Sorry. Okay. So, I'm the only one competing. How sad is that? All right, so. That would, no, actually, that would be the speech where if there were like 5 judges, it would be like 1, 5, 3, 3, 3. And the coach is convinced that something happened. No. Your student just blew it. Okay. All right, so here's some housekeeping things that I have been asked to remind them. So there are some lovely bright pink poster boards that are really hard to miss out and around the lobby area here, not the lobby area up there, that ask you some questions. You should have gotten Post-it notes when you checked in either last night or this morning. We would love for you to jot down your thoughts, answers, ideas on those Post-it notes, stick them on the hot pink poster board so that it helps us define kind of some of those mission, vision, where are we going, what's the answer? Because one of the things we've realized as a board we've been guilty of in the past is just saying, well, I've talked to the coaches and they all want this. And then oddly enough, somebody from a different part of the state will say, no, I talked to the coaches and they want this. So we thought it might be easier if we just had your Post-it notes of what you really want. So please do that for us. Also, if you are a presenter, please see Mary or Christette to pick up something that I don't remember what it is. If you, what? Nope, that's not it. It was something else. Because the next note is that if you're an attendee of a session, you should pick up your feedback sheet for each session. They think that will be easier than having the presenters pick them up. So kind of like when kids pick up their ballots to take to the round if you're in debate. Speech doesn't do that because that would get weird. Go ahead and pick those up so you can review us. And then finally, if you are wanting PGP, professional growth points for the state of Indiana education, recertification, fun stuff, oops. We will have a link on our website later today that you can just fill out what session you went to, all of that. It has my lovely scanned-in signature on it to make it official so that you can get those printed out and turned into the appropriate parties, and there you go. Yes?
Like you said, out your email or just on the website?
It'll be on the IHSFA website. But probably, I would imagine the IHSFA social will also immediately seize upon that and put it on the IHSFA Google Hangout. If you haven't joined that, Sarah Berghoff's doing a really great job at trying to like push through things that are going up on the website via the IHSFA social on Google. And then I get these emails that you guys are all actually doing things, so that's kind of cool. Any other questions? All right, then go get water, go to the restroom, and then go to your sessions.